And then you add on everything else, yeah.
As it used to be coming from the south, there was no problem.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. After that, we need a whole separate truck route. Yeah, that's right. It's
We're
not.
overdue for a truck route. You're right about
Oh my gosh, I mean, I've got these huge gigantic things behind me, and then I pull over, and then they pull over behind me.
that. And the governor's economic council is out there advocating to have more companies come in and use the greater Front Range area as a whole.
Oh, well, that's
So
what
it's
I'm
only
saying.
going to increase.
Hello, welcome back. How are you? All right, how are you? Okay, I'm glad you will do it on Sunday as well. So, yeah, I'll give you a call on that. And I thought that Carly was going to ask you regarding. Yeah, I have emailed it. Yes, you can. Set it all up. You have an email.
The testing 1, 2, 3 testing. The October meeting of the Community Advisory Committee is now in session.
Live with.
All rise. Jenny Nellinger is coming into the courtroom. Okay, let's start with introductions, please. We do have a quorum, so we'll start with introductions for everybody. I'm Jim Moore, at-large member and current chair of the committee.
Kevin Walker, at-large and first vice chair.
Jessica McMullen, Policy and Communications Manager here at PPACG.
John DeVoe, Woodland Park.
Aubrey Day, Citizen at Large.
Rachel Beck, Colorado Springs Chamber and EDC.
Roy Rosenthal, Manitou Springs.
Tamara Goodner, City of Hollis Springs.
Sharon Brown, City of Fountain.
Ellen Hasse, Teller County.
Julie Ott, League of Women Voters.
Patty Apola, Colorado Springs.
Jen Ellinger, El Paso County.
Al Moffat, El Paso County.
Courtney Stone, Citizen at Large.
And in the viewing audience,
Brian Vitoli, City of Colorado Springs, Mountain Metro Transit.
and TAC.
And Zach.
And TAC.
Aaron Busto, Federal Highway Administration.
Okay, and we will be hearing more from both Brian and David a little bit later. And our staff representatives this afternoon are,
Kevin Reyes, PPACG.
and we thank everybody for being here. It's a good turnout. We do have some important things to deal with today. Let me start with the consent agenda. Does anyone have anything they'd like to pull out of that? But that would include the agenda and report from the Board of Directors and TIP Administrative Change 8. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. I'll second.
We have a motion and second. Any comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Public comments? Any from our audience? Seeing no immediate move. I would like to remind everyone, hopefully you got it, but if you didn't, an invitation to the I-25 Cimarron Interchange ribbon cutting tomorrow at America the Beautiful Park. I suspect if you can find a place to park at the park, you shouldn't have any trouble finding where the ceremony is going to take place. But I'm assuming it's like at the southwest end somewhere. But it'll be obvious. And hopefully they'll get everything done before the weather hits tomorrow. That would be nice. But I'm planning to go, and I would hope that as many of you have time and it's not too much of an interference in your work schedules for those of you who work. That would be a nice opportunity. This has been one of the major projects that we've had our fingerprints on. So I think it's going to be good to go to this event. Okay.
What is the time, Jim? I'm sorry. It's scheduled for 1 to 2 tomorrow afternoon. Thank you. Okay, first information item, Dave Krustinger from CDOT will talk to us about Front Range Passenger Rail.
Thank you all. Again, David Kretzinger, CDOT Division of Transit and Rail. Pleasure to be here. Hope to be able to answer all the questions that you have. As the slide indicates on the front, I'm going to touch on a little bit of Bustang all the way up to high-speed rail and what it means for Colorado Springs and the connections that you might make with different choices going forward into the future. Let's see. There we go. Just briefly, we started the Bustang bus service 2 years ago to replace the Front Range Express service, the FREX service that operated up until 2012. The ridership year over year has grown considerably, and we're glad to be serving Colorado Springs and Pikes Peak residents. And the ridership has roughly doubled year over year, as has our fare box revenue. We're, as a system as a whole, we're at about 50% fare box recovery, meaning that our operating cost, 50% of that is paid back by the fares that people pay to get on the bus. I'll do a quick shout out to how the Bustang service connects to all the rest of the state. So harder to see, but the purple lines here are Bustang going up to Fort Collins, west to Glenwood Springs. All the other colored lines, brown, red, green, are existing intercity bus services that many people don't know exist. There are a lot of them are part of the legacy bus system from the 50s. It's been getting smaller and smaller over a lot of time. But the Bustang does provide a valuable connection to all those folks coming into through Colorado Springs and making their way out to all other parts of the state. Focusing on the South Route has done well in its growth. It's grown more modestly than the other two corridors, north and west, but it still has doubled in its ridership, and we're very pleased with that. In comparison to the FREX service, we do not yet serve Castle Rock or the Denver Tech Center. So those are two things that we're looking forward to doing in the future when we can bring on some park and rides that provide a safe and efficient way to do that. Right now, pull off in the Tech Center would cost 15 minutes. If your destination's a Tech Center, that'd be all well and good. If your destination's beyond the Tech Center, then you're on a 15-minute joyride waiting to get to your final destination. So we're trying not to inconvenience passengers between point A and point B. Larkspur, Castle Rock, and the Tech Center are ones that we'd like to bring on in the future. We don't have specific dates for those yet. The bigger idea there is about 10-mile spacing between the stations. Again, this is intended to be an express service. All these points relate to the rail that I know is the main topic of this. But 10-mile spacing, you get spacing any closer than that, and you feel like you're on a milk run, and you're really not getting from point A to point B. So we're trying to strike that balance for everybody. I'll touch on, yes, sir.
Has there been any polling here in Colorado Springs or the southern area as to the fact that the ridership hasn't grown, maybe because we only have 2 lanes between Monument and Castle Rock, i.e. a lot of traffic?
We haven't done any polling specifically on that topic, but we've heard loud and clear that the #1 priority for the Pikes Peak region is to take care of that gap section, and we think that would improve the reliability and the travel times both directions. I guess it should also be said that if we can fill in these park and rides, then that provides better ability for residents in the middle of the corridor to have the commute into Colorado Springs and not have it all be sort of focused on the commute north. We'd be able to do that as well. All right. Yes, sorry.
When you consider going to Tech Center, if you go to light rail across the street, you've got the ability not only to go to Tech Center, but downtown or DIA.
Absolutely.
It should really increase your ridership, I would think.
Yes. Yes, we'd very much like to have a Tech Center stop that makes all those connections. Work with RTD to do that. Thank you. I'm going to touch briefly on two plans and then conclude with the Front Range Passenger Rail Commission, which was created by the state legislature in May of this year. So a few years back, 2012 to 2014, there was lots of money at the federal level, about $10 billion at the federal level that was available for high-speed rail. Everybody said, well, we're not sure if we want to do high-speed rail in Colorado, but CDOT should at least, prepare to get in line for that money if that kind of money keeps rolling. So we looked at a whole bunch of alignments, Fort Collins to Pueblo, looked at all kinds of speeds, kind of settled in on something that had a kind of a cruising speed of about 150 miles an hour, which all sounds very nice. The diagram on the left shows as it comes up from Colorado Springs at wraparound 470, make connections with the RTD system that you just mentioned, sir, and then be able to feed points, use RTD system to feed into the Denver area. A lot of folks said, well, gee, that's great. If I go to DIA, that's wonderful, but if I'm going downtown or any of those other locations, that's not as convenient. I don't want to make the transfer, so why don't you guys look at some other options for using RTD's track? It might save you some money. So we went back in the last year and a half and did just that. Looked at the other two options that you see there. One is using RTD's light rail track from the south. Could you put intercity trains on that track? And then same thing from the north. The one on the right is if you can't use the light rail track, in other words, if those vehicle types are too different and the cost to kind of make those work together and play together well is too expensive, then go on up to DIA. And the airport line and the North Metro line is commuter rail technology, which is much closer to what the vehicles that you'd use for intercity service. So we took a look at all those. I won't read through all of these numbers, but I will point your eyes to two columns. One is the CapEx column, which is the capital expenditure, basically what does it take to build it, and then the ridership column. What we found compared to the original alternative that wrapped around 470 is if you go through Denver on RTD's track, you can save about 15% of the cost, dropping from $11.5 billion down to $9.7 billion. It drops 16% of the cost, but your ridership only drops 15%. So from a benefit cost standpoint, you're about even with the original alternative. When you go all the way to the airport and then try to go into downtown that way, it's not as convenient. It's a little bit more around Robin Hood's barn, if you will. You lose, you only drop 3% of the costs, and you lose about 20% of your ridership. So that one didn't pan out to be, unless it's just a phasing option, it didn't pan out to be the thing that you jump out in front of the public or voters or politicians and say that's the one we should go for. So based on that, we would carry the other two forward, and unless there was some other good reason to bring that third one back, we'd leave that one to the side for now. These were the concerns that the Pikes Peak region as a whole expressed when that report was being developed and the draft was going through technical and policy committees. There were a couple unanswered questions. So the initial operating segment had a terminus in the Briargate area in Colorado Springs, I think rightly so, said, well, that'd be nice to get that close, but that's not downtown for us. That doesn't do the job. It's $1 billion more to get from Briargate to all the way into downtown. That additional 11 miles, about $100 million a mile, so it's $1 billion more to get there. A lot of dollars. Didn't change the ridership a whole lot. So that's something. And then the second part was we really don't know how this, so great, you guys have shown us that, commuters could get back and forth between the two cities, but you really haven't done enough analysis to make us comfortable on what the effects would be on the airport. Does high-speed rail between the two metro areas steal Colorado Springs airport ridership or airport boardings, and they all, zoom up to DIA and get on at DIA? Or does the speed of everything help a lot of people in the middle make connections both directions and maybe more people come down to Colorado Springs? We didn't have enough information to answer that question. So I think that's a good one to come back to if this is what people feel like is the next best step. So we're in the process of completing a state freight and passenger rail plan. This is a Federal Railroad Administration requirement. Going back to where I started in the presentation, to be eligible for federal funds, to be able to even get in line for competitive funds, you have to do one of these and keep it updated every 4 to 5 years. So the original one was published in 2012. Here we are in 2017. We're doing the update. Keeps us in line, doesn't commit us to anything unless and until everybody's ready to jump on the bandwagon. So let me bring all of these from Mustang to high-speed rail and everything in between. Let me bring it all into perspective to help answer some questions. So price tag-wise, We can keep building the park and rides that I showed you earlier in the presentation. We can connect Bustang. These price tags on the left don't include the managed lanes or the gap section widening. That's on the highway side. So if we're just focusing on the transit investment, relatively inexpensive to add the park and rides to what would normally happen with all the highway lanes. If you want to go up the freight railroad tracks at about the same speed as the bus, but have a maybe more reliable time, I mean, we still don't have a solution for the tech center section. Even if you widen the gap section between Monument and Castle Rock, you still start hitting congestion north of Castle Rock going into the tech center. So we don't have a good solution there. The rail line would provide some relief to that if you're following the freight tracks. Freight railroads are not anywhere close to giving it away. Their coal traffic is coming down, but they're still using it, so you basically have to build at least one track next to their freight tracks. The trains move at too different speeds to be able to easily put a lot of trains on the same track. And then high-speed rail on the right, very expensive, billions and billions. So let's see, I had one other. Let's see if I have, okay, I don't have it. So travel time-wise, right now for the Bustang, it takes you about an hour and 45, hour and 50 minutes to get to downtown Denver because of all the stops and because you're slugging your way through the tech center and some of that part of I-25. Commuter rail, you get around some of that, and it takes you down to about an hour 30. And then with the high-speed rail, you can get to DIA in about 45 minutes downtown, either with a transfer or if you used the alternative that we set aside, you can get to downtown in about an hour. So the price tags go up. You may or may not gain a ton of additional travel time benefits. So those are the kind of the trade-offs that we all have to make. Everybody says, I want Front Range Rail, but I don't want to pay for it. So we're stuck there. So then we took a look at, well, where's our money sit today? Everybody says, well, can't you just turn over those couch cushions and find some money? All the money that we could scrape together from the couch cushions that we could turn over today is in the $100 million range. So we could get close to doing all the Bustang stuff and building all those park and rides. All these other programs would require a lot more planning and require us to do things that really you get into having to match. If you're going to pull down federal funds, you have to match it about 50-50 to get those federal funds. So you pick your price tag. If you're going $4 billion, okay, we the citizens of Colorado have to come up with $2 billion to match $2 billion in federal, and so on with high-speed rail. We've got to come up with $6 billion to get $6 billion and have a $12 billion project. So enter legislation this May. Folks said, hey, CDOT's done some good work, just doesn't seem to be like we can move this whole thing forward. So let's have a Front Range Passenger Rail Commission. Here are the people on the commission, 11 voting members, the freight railroads, Southeast County representative, which is kind of east of Pueblo, a couple passenger rail advocates, and then representatives from all of the metropolitan planning organizations, including PPACG. I gave the same presentation to your board a couple of months ago. So this is a better body, has more political strength to get everybody's opinions and to focus ideas. It's got three purposes: continue, keep the Amtrak Southwest Chief going through southeastern Colorado, Chicago to Los Angeles if you travel it end to end, other destinations in between if you're just going from Colorado to Albuquerque or Colorado over to Kansas or things like that. The second bullet is really more germane to this presentation, is facilitate the development of passenger rail, including draft legislation due by December 1st. So they set themselves a fairly ambitious deadline. What we're hearing from that group is they're not going to have any mind-blowing legislation by December 1st, but maybe something a year from now. It's going to take a little more time to get 20 of with representatives from PPACG plus the 50 representatives in DRCOG region plus the other 20 in North Front Range region, all to come to a common opinion about how to move it forward. Oops, going the other way. So opportunities and challenges. We all know that population's growing faster than we can build anything, highways or otherwise, to solve our problems. Millennials for now are really using transit a lot more than the previous generation. It remains to be seen as millennials move into having children of their own, if they follow the patterns of the previous generation and move to the suburbs and buy cars or not. We just don't know. Enough time hasn't gone by. Challenge is pretty obvious. We don't have the money. If we're going to build anything fast, it takes a lot of money to do it, whether it's bus or rapid transit or high-speed rail. It takes a lot of money. And we just haven't come to a conclusion on how to move that forward. Incremental would be one example of incremental would be, well, start commuter rail in Colorado Springs and build north slowly. Add 5 miles a year, and RTD in Denver area is building south, and eventually you connect. That might be an incremental strategy. The whole corridor strategy is like California did. They went to the voters of the whole state, passed a giant ballot measure, and said, "Woohoo! We've got $50 billion. We're ready to go." So that's what the whole corridor strategy looks like. And then grow bus into rail versus the rail extensions, I guess, was what I was just talking about. So, yes?
Can you go back a slide real quick?
Yeah, you bet.
I'm just curious how that's worded, that the funding is growing slower than population. So obviously the funding isn't population-based.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more, or is there potential to sort of shift the funding to be more?
Sure. So two things. Gas tax, for example, hasn't been indexed for inflation since 1992. So we're paying the same gas tax cents per gallon in 1992 as today. And it hasn't gone up at all. So when people see a $3 or $4 price per gallon, they think CDOT's sitting on a bunch of gold coins because our proportion of the $4 went up, but it doesn't. So index for inflation, we're actually losing money. And then the other thing is that our demographic is changing. So as an aging population, more people are, if you look at sales tax, more people are retiring and purchasing things that are sales tax exempt, groceries and medical services. And so although the economy is booming, there's lots of money in the economy, more and more of it. It's small numbers, but it's significant in terms of the revenue. Less of it's coming back in sales tax revenues.
So does CDOT have a position on the gas tax and whether that's sort of our best bet for being able to more appropriately fund transportation projects?
And on that subject, there has been some polling done. It's interesting when you ask people for the same dollar amount, you say, okay, I need a gas tax increase of 10 cents per gallon, or I need a half-cent sales tax. If you say a half-cent sales tax, you get almost two-thirds support right now. If you say 10-cent gas tax raise, which is the same revenue at the end of it, it's two-thirds against. So gas tax just doesn't appear to resonate with people.
Okay, thanks.
So we'll go where the money is, I guess.
Please make sure your microphones are turned on.
On that topic,
Yes.
what about a use tax for vehicles not relying upon gasoline-based fuels?
Excellent question. CDOT has done over the last year a small pilot test of a user fee. It goes by different names. Sometimes it's called a mileage-based user fee. Sometimes it's called a road usage charge. Concept is the same. You get charged per mile of travel. When it's linked to a antenna where it can tell you where you are and which roads you're using, it has a lot of potential in terms of being able to put the dollars in the right place. And if you're a farmer and if you're driving your dually around on your farm, it can tell you're on the farm and you're not on the state highway, so you shouldn't be paying any tax. But it would solve that problem for increasing number of electric vehicles that don't pay any tax.
Thank you.
That program needs to be rolled out to a larger pilot test of thousands of people instead of, we've only done about 100 people so far. So I won't read all the bullets on this slide. Really, the bottom bullet says it all. CDOT will continue to work with all of you. You want transit, we'll do a walk before you can run strategy. We'll keep trying to implement those Mustang park and rides and provide the bidirectional service. If you all, as part of the larger Front Range population, feel like it's time for something more, we're happy to work with you all and to keep developing whatever that would be. So I'll take any last questions, and I think we've got other agenda items that you guys are ready to get on to.
If we could get the lights back on, please, Bethany, and I'm looking at Tamara.
Yeah. So just a crazy idea, Amazon is looking for their second headquarter location.
Mm-hmm.
I think Denver is in the running or is a possibility. Is there, and they're bringing 50,000 jobs.
Right.
A lot of them probably are going to be millennials, as well as obviously lots of trucking and vehicular usage going to and out of that facility. Is there a way to take advantage of that if Denver does get it and get Amazon, and we kind of incorporate that into widening our highways or putting in some additional funding for some of these
So a couple answers to that. Amazon's got one facility already being constructed, which is their trucking center. They call it their fulfillment center. That's already being built, and I may even be a little bit behind the time. So that's the trucking part. The headquarters part is not trucking. It's the lawyers and the accountants and the folks that write the program for you to be able to do your online business. It's all those folks. At the moment, it would depend where they land. We wouldn't treat them as separately than any other business that's bringing their headquarters here. They'd pay employment tax, and their employees would go out in the community and pay gas tax and sales tax just like everybody else. So I think it's a disincentive to attracting headquarters type of folks if you say, okay, gotcha, you're coming here, we're going to get you for some extra.
Okay, so you're saying that's not an option.
But I think, it would be a considerable boost to all those funding sources that we've been through. I mean, 50,000 employees roughly would be a $5 billion a year payroll. And the multiplier effect on all the goods and services they buy is about double of that. So they bring about $10 billion a year to Colorado.
And as I recall, I think I saw a news story that Amazon received 268 proposals in response to their request.
Yeah.
Mr. Moffett?
Is this on the PPACG or some other website? I just looked quickly and didn't find it. Is it open to the public, or at least?
It is open to the public, and I guess I'd have to ask the PPACG staff if it's on the website, or if we could put it on the website.
It's just in our
Meeting materials, okay.
Because
Okay.
I had posted something as an update on filling the gap onto a neighborhood blog site. I got 47 to 50 responses, and a quarter of them were build rail, build rail, build rail. And the response I gave them was, we all agree on the concept, but the money is just big, really big. Something like this, I think, would enhance the ongoing communication so that people realize that we need both the gap and answers for future mass transit. I think it'd be good to get this posted, if it's possible.
Okay, we've had questions already. I'd like Rachel, and if there's any other, raise your hand. Otherwise, Rachel will be the last question, because we've got a good agenda, and we've got a 5 o'clock meeting behind us.
No pressure.
No pressure at all.
Thank you for that great presentation.
Sure.
2 questions for you. One is, if the managed lane is built in the gap section, will Mustang go in the managed lane so that it can get around some of the traffic?
Yes, it will.
And then the other question is, can you clarify, did you say that you've seen polling that shows sales tax gets 2/3 support from voters?
That was polling that was done about a year ago.
What poll is that?
It was a poll that was done by the Metro Mayor's Chamber, Colorado Association of Transit Agencies known as CASTA, and COPERG. I don't have access to the raw data.
Is that a statewide poll or just in the Denver area?
It was a statewide poll.
Okay. We
Because
participated in 2 statewide polls in the last year.
Okay.
That show that sales tax gets about 45% support, not even close to 2/3 support.
Okay.
I was just curious where that number came from.
All right. Yeah, those were the numbers that I was given from a little over a year ago. So
Well, since taxation is
I'll see if I can track that.
job jar
It's
right
what?
now. Taxation is not in our job jar right now, so can we table any further discussion of that for the
Just wanted to get that on the record, Jim, so everybody didn't think sales tax is the answer to funding
Right. Fair enough.
funding our rail system.
No, I think that's true. David, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
This has been very helpful and keeps us up to date on some of the options that are out there, so thank you.
Look forward to continuing to collaborate with you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up to bat, Mr. Patulli, you're up.
Good afternoon. Brian Vitulli with the City of Colorado Springs, Mountain Metro Transit. What I was hoping to do today was just present to you what our preliminary 2018 transit service improvement plan looks like. To try to get some preliminary feedback from you all. We're in a stakeholder and interest group feedback phase right now. So I've been to City of Colorado Springs Citizens Transportation Advisory Board, our Transit Passenger Advisory Committee, the PPRTA CAC Board, Community Transit Coalition, and other interest groups, PPACG, TAC, MCC, and now you. And we're just looking for some initial feedback for what our service improvements will hopefully look like for 2018. Now what we're planning on here is a major service upgrade for next year that continues to improve the overall productivity and performance of our system, continues the work to improve our existing customers' experience, but also make those improvements that can attract new riders. And several recent planning studies that have been done had all said very similar results, saying the same thing: to first fix what we have before we expand, but recognizing that there are going to be opportunities to expand, and that we try to engage in partnerships with some of those organizations or services that provide or require us to go outside of our existing service area. So what I'm trying to say simply is partnerships. When we are looking to expand outside of our existing service area, let's try to engage those partners to help us fund those services. So this fact sheet that is in your packet, I should also mention, if you don't have your packet with you, I do have extra copies, so I could pass those out. But the improvements that we're proposing for 2018 are being funded through about $1.4 million in PPRTA revenues that are above budget. So these are, we did 2 budget amendments. PPRTA did 2 budget amendments this year, and that's what's going to fund all of this service. We're getting a slight city general fund increase of about $180,000 for transit, which is continued good news. Right now we're at the PPRTA maintenance of effort level that we were back in 2004. Now we're going to be going above that, by $180,000, which is small potatoes, but very, very tasty potatoes. So we will take that. And 180,000. 180, yeah.
Maintenance of effort, is that inflation adjusted or not?
No.
So
No,
you're
it's
not
2004.
having a maintenance of effort.
You said that. Yeah.
Somebody had
But that $180,000, what we're looking to do is, we now have the Joint Call Center on our site. We're looking to hire a mobility manager to kind of take over what was PPACG's role. They had the mobility manager position for several years. So we're looking to match that position with a 20% match out of that $180,000 will go toward that. But also, every year we have our three major contracts. We have our fixed route operations, our ADA paratransit operations, and our maintenance contracts. They all have escalation with each new year. So the $180,000 will help fund that too. But all of this new service that I'm going to describe to you is being paid for with the $1.4 million in PPRTA revenues above budget. And before we get to the alternatives, if you go to the second page of that fact sheet, I just want to briefly say that all of those alternatives are data-based and community-based. Earlier this year, we did a system-wide service assessment, applying our service standards for on-time performance and route performance, how efficient the routes are, what the ridership is like. So all of the alternatives that you see on the first page are being informed by the service assessment that we did. And what that does, it identifies routes that are candidates for extra service, for high-frequency service, going from 60 minutes to 30 minutes or 30 minutes to 50-minute service. But it also identifies routes that are underperforming, which would make them candidates for, perhaps a first step would be, a targeted marketing campaign on those routes. Second step may be restructuring the route to make it more efficient. And the third step may be discontinuing the route. If nothing else worked, we would perhaps move to discontinue the route and take the resources from that route and reallocate them to another service. So this is a big step in making our improvement proposal more fact-based or data-based, and but also providing room for more community-oriented service improvements. It may not make sense efficiency-wise or ridership-wise, but it's the right thing to do. So that report is on our website under planning studies if you'd like to look at that. And it's called the 2017 Fixed Route Service Analysis. So going back to our proposal, what we're looking to do, all of the items that you see in the shaded area, we believe we would be able to do with that $1.4 million. I do want to point out a few things, though. The first item, in the first row, Route 27, increase weekday frequency to 15 minutes, as well as the last item, the last row, Route 1, 15-minute service. That's where we're looking for the most feedback. We don't have enough money to do both of them, along with all the other improvements, so we're asking our stakeholders, either or. Do we put 15-minute service on Route 27, which would complete the Academy Boulevard corridor? The entire corridor would have 15-minute service. It's just a couple weeks ago on October 1st, we added 15-minute service to Route 25, which goes from the Citadel Mall north to the Voyager Parkway Transfer Center. So all of North Academy now has 15-minute service. Route 27 would complete the entire corridor going south. The other 15-minute service option is Route 1, and I need my glasses here. Route 1 goes from the downtown terminal, kind of going southeast down to the Academy Hancock transfer location. So that's more of a community type of service, carries an incredible amount of riders. Both Route 27 and Route 1 are a couple of our top performing routes, but it's more of a tour of the southeastern part of the city, whereas the Academy Boulevard corridor is much more direct. It doesn't deviate much from the Academy Boulevard corridor. So those are the two options where we're really looking for feedback. Do we put the 15-minute service on Route 1 or Route 27?
And you can't do both.
We can't do both if we want to do all these other improvements, which are also really good candidates and meet some of the minimum service standards. And I also want to point out on the first page here under the alternatives, Route 11, adding a weekday daytime vehicle to improve on-time performance. We were able to do that with our October 1st service change. So that's already operating, and that's off the list. That was something, routes 10 and 11, which go from our downtown terminal. They go down to Southgate Road on South Nevada before they branch off. That's the 11, and that's the 10 right there. And they meet again down at Pikes Peak Community College. So the combination of routes 10 and 11 on South Academy, South Nevada corridor, that's another one of our 15-minute service corridors. So that Route 11, 10 change is already in place.
Brian, just for clarification, 27 and 1 currently are on 30 minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Courtney?
Have you done any specific outreach to the neighborhoods that are in and around Route 1, just as far as increasing frequency throughout a more populated area?
Well, we've reached out to Aubrey Day. There's a RISE advocacy or interest group, and we've reached out to them to try to get some feedback, and we expect to get some of the results from that very soon. Yeah. And then, of course, I failed to say this. This is what I was going to get to at the end. We're looking for this initial feedback to help us finalize our proposal that will go out in December. And that's normally we release our proposal in December prior to our January public meetings. So there could be some tweaks that come out of all of this initial feedback, but that's what we're out here for, is to try to get some of that initial feedback. Jen?
Brian, would I need to go to the website to get where the stop and start points are, as well as what the average times are? Not average how often you come, but how long it takes to go from there, like, down to the center of town, or that kind of stuff. I guess for those of us that live out, frankly, there are a couple, 3 or 4 times that if I could avoid using a car to come to art, like art walk nights and some other stuff, I would certainly do it.
Right.
So especially to try it and see what it's like.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, on our website, we have all of our bus routes have PDF schedules you could download, or we now have real-time bus tracking, so you can check to see if your bus is on time and when it's scheduled to arrive at the next stop. But all of that information is on our website. And so you can, by looking at the schedules, you can figure out how long it takes you to get from the stop nearest your location to where you're going.
I use it over in Manitou, but I haven't used it inner city yet.
Okay.
In town.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I was wondering, where can I get the details so I could look at and evaluate these based on what I know it takes to get around from some of those places.
Right, yeah, and you can do that. And we don't really have, it might be a nice addition to our system map to have the service level kind of spelled out. Is it a 60-minute route? Does it come every 60 minutes? Is it a 30-minute route? I mean, we do keep track of that. We do have some performance standards that say, how many routes in our system operate on 30-minute headways or 60-minute headways. But it would be nice for the public to look at our system map and know that. I mean, if you look at a hand schedule, you'll see that it comes every half hour, every hour. You can figure that out. But it would be nice to put it out there a little bit easier. Yeah, right. Courtney?
Oh, I was just going to suggest, Jen, if you use Google Maps, there's an option for the transit version, and that, I mean, it's not the official site, but it does, you can click back and forth and say it's an hour and a half versus a 15-minute drive, and, you know, just, not to say that they all are an hour and a half, I saw your face. It could be.
Yes.
I have a question. On Route 11, it says daytime vehicle. Is this a bus or is this something else?
It's a large fixed route bus, yeah. So we added one vehicle, one more bus to the operation of Route 11, yeah. Right.
Okay, let's give Brian a chance to finish his formal comments. And then I'm just mindful that we have a big mountain at the latter part of our agenda today.
Sure. And so getting back earlier with the talk about fixing what we have first before we expand, you know, we've been negotiating with Memorial Hospital North and the Children's Hospital and also Pikes Peak Community College for some time now. These would kind of fall under seeking partnerships to help us implement new services. So what is shown on your handout here is what we're intending to do to try to start some base level of service, and then hopefully the additional dollars that come in from our partnerships could lead to an enhanced level of service. What we're looking to do is add a route starting at Route 5 on Boulder and Platte, which is a 15-minute route. Have a new service go up Union to Academy and Union. And as I mentioned earlier, Route 25 is now a 15-minute route. So we would have a new service going from Boulder and Platte up to Academy in between the Nevada corridor and the Academy corridor. You'll see that there's an absence of a good north-south route in this corridor. So we're going to be proposing to put a service in there, and then a kind of a demonstration project, like a base level of service, so an express route, a limited stop route, or a peak hour type service from Academy and Union, going up Union to Memorial Hospital North, and Children's, which are right here. So something on Union here, going to those facilities. So this would likely be a service that runs in the peak hour, the AM peak hour, the PM peak hour, and maybe a midday round trip. Maybe 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m., 3 to 6 p.m., something like that. If Memorial and Children's wish to improve that service a little bit better, that's where we could get into a better level of service. And then also from the Voyager Parkway Transfer Center up here, PPCC would like to take part in the College Pass program, but it's a very difficult decision for them because they have no service to their Rampart campus up north here. We think if we implement some type of base level of service, perhaps they would then want to take part in the College Pass program. So both of these services would likely be 2-year demonstration projects. Hopefully they would be successful and partnerships would continue, or maybe Mountain Metro would be able to fold them into their system permanently, but that's what we're looking to do. And then Route 3 service to Manitou. We're looking to increase the frequency from 60 minutes to 30 minutes on Saturdays, and 60-minute to 30-minute service on Route 1 on Saturdays. Both of these routes warrant that. And then further south and southeast, you have Route 32, which goes into Security and Widefield, from Academy and Hancock down into Security and Widefield. There is no Saturday service there currently. It's just a Monday through Friday service, so we're looking to put Saturday service there. And then add 60-minute Sunday service on Route 10. So you'll have two options going down to the southern part of the city. Route 11 here already has 7-day-a-week service. Route 10 would now have 7-day-a-week service. And then add Sunday service on Route 19, which goes from the downtown terminal to across from the University Village Shopping Center up at Nevada, and Austin Bluffs. I believe I hit everything on there, but I know you just got this a week or so ago, but if you have any comments over the next several weeks, feel free to send them my way or send them to Bethany, and Bethany can pass them on to me. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be looking to kind of finalize a lot of this initial feedback that we get and send out our final proposal in December, and then have our public meetings in January. And since we'll need more vehicles for some of these frequency improvements, it'll kind of be a phased implementation next year. So the service additions will probably take place next fall after we get new vehicles that we have on order delivered. And a lot of the off-peak services like Route 3 and Route 1, Saturday service, and 32 and 19, all of those services that don't require additional vehicles we'll be able to implement in the spring. So we'll have public meetings in January for the spring service change, and then public meetings in July for the fall service change. But this is kind of a grand picture of what we'd like to do next year.
Okay. We're going to take questions, but lights, please. Lights, please. I want to allow 5 minutes for us to ask some questions here. We're running a little bit behind our schedule, but I think we're going to be okay. So, Jen.
Quick question, and forgive me if I've missed it because I've been out of the country a lot. Update on the transit station?
Sure. Well,
You don't have to go big.
so in 15 minutes or less? No, I'm just kidding. So the steering committee, of which you were a part of, made your recommendation to the mayor back in June or July. The mayor accepted. Council last month approved a resolution of support for that location. So we're in the midst of, we'll be meeting with the FTA in the next week or two. We're looking to, I think we're currently drafting a scope for a master developer RFP that will kind of help guide us through the process, represent the city's interests, but also work with our private partners and the property owner. Initially they said that they wanted to retain ownership. Now it's looking like it could go either way, which would, if we outright own the property, it would make things incredibly easier. So we're continuing negotiations internally and are meeting with our FTA friends. So
Making progress.
So make progress, moving forward. Yeah.
Thank you.
Alan,
Sure.
Did you have a question? Hal, did you have a question?
I'm going to reserve.
Oh, you are? Okay. Alan?
Brian, thanks for all the hard work and all the tweaking. Just point of clarification, this list as well as the map are available on your website, yes?
The map is, for sure.
The map is, okay.
This list is not. And it's not for really any particular reason, but kind of doing our widespread feedback here with all of our stakeholders. We're looking for that feedback to help us finalize our proposal, and our proposal that goes out in December will go on our website, because that's when we reach out to everybody to look for feedback before the public meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
Last question, Aubrey?
Thanks, Brian.
Sure.
It's really exciting. You called the Memorial Hospital route pilot, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is there sort of a clear, distinct objective of what makes or breaks that? And do you feel like with just peak hour times that you'll be able to make that success?
That's a good question. Initially, we were thinking a 3-year demonstration project, which, no, we haven't defined what those thresholds would be to make, determine whether it's successful or not. But we will do that, especially with our stakeholders, with our partners. We would need to identify that definitely before we move forward. But in our last meeting with them, they indicated a willingness to make it a 2-year demonstration project. And that's, that's okay, but you're right, we do need to be clear on what the, the measures are and whether we're going to achieve it success or not. So, thank you.
Okay. Well, Brian, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I have a couple of thoughts that I'll be happy to share with you over coffee someday.
Sure, okay. All right.
I do applaud the interest in expanding the service into the southeastern quadrant.
Right.
I think that's critical.
Okay. Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you. It's good to see all kinds of interesting activity going on in a variety of places. Maybe we could have rail run up Union. Okay. Tip amendment number 13, Mr. Reyes.
Good afternoon.
Warm-up part.
This is it, yep. Good afternoon, Kevin Reyes, Transportation Planner with PPACG. So today I'm going to be going over the amendment number 13 for the 2017 to 2022 Transportation Improvement Program. Amendment number 13 comes in two different parts, and both of those are from the Colorado Department of Transportation. They are requesting to add additional funds into the TIP for two maintenance projects. The first project is at State Highway 16 and Sneffels Street, and they are planning to do some intersection improvements there. The scope of work includes design and installation of new traffic signal, upgrade of ADA ramps, along with minor curb and gutter work and sidewalk improvements. The second project is at I-25 and Rock Rimmon. Again, this is another maintenance project. And CDOT plans to conduct bridge preventative maintenance, driving surface preventative maintenance, safety improvements, and ride quality improvement. The funding of these two projects is broken out in attachment number 3, if you're interested in seeing which funding sources are going to these projects. There's quite a few, so I won't list them all up here. But and then the attachments number 1 and 2 contain the letters from CDOT, which outlines a little bit more information about each of these projects. But more or less, these are just maintenance projects that CDOT is planning to do. And again, all the funds that are going to these projects, these are new funds that are coming to our region from CDOT. Any questions on those?
Questions, comments? Go ahead, Jen.
I could not, I don't know this neck of the woods very well.
Uh-huh.
The Sneffels and
Sneffels
16,
and-
obviously Rock Rimmon I got a big handle on, so.
Let me go down.
And I'm looking at the map, I don't know Mesa Ridge Parkway.
Okay. Do you want me to pull it up on a larger scale? Or?
Tell me about where it is, what's that out there?
Oh.
Maybe pull it up. It'd be
Yeah, I can pull it up.
Southern access to Fort Carson.
Yeah.
That runs across the north part of.
Gate 20.
Gate 20.
Gate 20.
And it runs across the north part of Fountain, connects up to Powers.
Yes.
Fountain Powers.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
The city of Fountain, not
The city of Fountain.
Right,
Yeah.
I know where you're talking, where it occurs in.
Yeah.
Connects to Powers? Okay. You're so smart.
This looks good.
Oh, you did?
This looks good.
Gosh. And
Now,
did you name
am I
it?
correct,
South
Brian?
Okay,
Oh,
well,
sorry,
Tamara
sorry.
and then Hal.
There's not all kinds of questions on the Rock Rimmon project, but one of the ones I want to ask is, I noticed that the asphalt pavement repair is a short-term safety measure. Is there, I guess, a couple of questions. Has previous repair have been made in that area for ridership comfort and all that? And I do understand there's the compaction issue of deep fill and deep foundations on the bridges, but with this short-term safety measure, to me, it seems like a Band-Aid. Is there a plan for a long-term fix?
Well, we have a representative from CDOT here that can answer that for you. I'm not exactly sure the technicalities of the project. I'm just putting it in the tip. That's all I do.
You're going to put in a pitch for the ribbon cutting, too, while you're up there? We've already done that
That'll be
once.
tomorrow.
Dave Watt with CDOT Region 2. In regards to the crescent moon-shaped crack, there's some debate with our geotech folks about whether or not that is a deep settlement foundation or whether or not there's a slope stability question. How you address that and remedy that is a little bit different, and we need to go out and do the lion's share of the work and go ahead and address this with these temporary safety measures. If the settlement has slowed down enough, these may be more permanent, and if they are not adequate enough in the next year, 2 years, whenever, we are monitoring that slope to find out how stable it is. There are inclinometers on there, which is a different type of word that means we're monitoring how fast the slope is moving or not. They've been in place about a year. It will continue to be monitored, and if we need to do something further, we will be addressing that. But we didn't want to hold up $10.6 million worth of improvements for this crescent crack. We really feel strongly that we need to improve this ride quality, do the bridge preventive maintenance work, and get this project moving forward. And if we can find out what's happening in the next few months while we're out there and do a little bit less temporary improvements, we'll do that. But we didn't want to hold up the rest of the project for our geotech folks. Sometimes they don't move in geologic time, but with it being a potential deep, that was not and it was a dig. It was a little bit of humor, but not a dig. But we really want to get the lion's share of the work moving forward.
Yeah, you said they don't move in geologic time, which I took as a positive. Al, did you have a question?
No, sir.
Oh, okay. Any other questions?
I do have another one, sorry, Dave.
Go ahead.
You're fine.
The retaining the MSC walls, is that going to be part of some of the repair work there, or is that a separate?
I didn't catch the question.
MSC wall, if you drive on that ramp, you can see that there's cracks, significant cracks in the MSC wall.
This is not, those MSC walls are, there's approximately 30-foot long straps that hold up the members of the MSC wall, and we are trying to stabilize the abutment fill behind the abutments and in between the MSC walls, but we're not going to be working on any of the panels with this.
Okay. You guys are addressing whatever is causing the panels to crack.
That's what we do have some injection grouting that we will be doing underneath the bridge approach slabs, and we think that's hopefully going to stabilize that wall. But we're not. It was a difficult thing to go through. It's when you're working underneath the ground or looking at remedies to address what is 30 to 40 or deeper, 30 to 40 feet or deeper below the surface. It's not guessing, but you're working your best engineering judgment, and this is the best move forward right now to try to get I-25 at a better ride and a more well-maintained facility.
We don't drive semis, but I'll bet the semis love those particular little humps right there.
You were being ironic, I believe.
I know you've said kind of we're still trying to find out why it's happening, but is there any data that's pointing toward either subsoil composition issues that, or related to, there's always been a subsidence issue in that section of Rock Rimmon because of the mining that took place before I got here. So I don't know whether there's an interrelationship. It's been a week or two.
There's been that potential. There's been reports of there's groundwater problems down below, and there's been some problems with the fill work that was done back with the Cosmics work. Okay. And a lot of the settlement has occurred. There's still the potential for more. The settlement rate has slowed down, so we think this is a good economic solution rather than going up and trying to rebuild all those embankments, that this is an economic solution that can get us more stable, better ride, and do the bridge preventive maintenance work. Part of that bridge preventive maintenance, why we're saying that is the department across the state is going away from bare concrete decks, which these have, and going to a different treatment, whether it's waterproofing membrane and asphalt or whether it's called a polyurethane concrete. We have done a number of structures along I-25 in Colorado Springs and treated those with a polyurethane concrete. It's about an inch overlay of some very spendy concrete, and if we did that on this, we would still have the same ride with the camber problems that we have in the girders. That's a different problem than the expansion devices that sometimes settle, and that wouldn't do anything with that. We'd still have the big humps. So this is kind of a balancing act between ride quality improvement with an affordable waterproofing membrane and HBP that also protects the bridge decks. and extends the service life of the bridge decks themselves, and also addressing the approaches as we come up on the bridges with raised expansion devices and filling in that lower area with some asphalt.
Thank you, David. Any other questions for Dave? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
I have a question for Kevin.
All right.
You had mentioned that the money's coming from external sources. If it wasn't used for this, is it possible to use it for anything else, or it's dedicated to these is the way that it came in? Funding?
Well, the funding sources that are used for these projects, PPACG doesn't have any discretion over these sources. So these are all decided on at the CDOT level, and they have their own internal process of determining where to put that money.
So there isn't something else that won't be done, at least at our level?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just, there are bridge asset management funds in this project. There are surface treatment, preventive maintenance funds in this project. And Kevin's right, those are administered through policy. We have added RPP funds into this TIP amendment. And where those RPP funds are coming from is projects that have closed out recently, being the Fillmore Interchange, as well as some savings from I-25 Cimarron that we're going to have the ribbon cutting ceremony with tomorrow. But those are RPP funds that there is some discretion with.
At 1 o'clock.
But we do think this is the best place to put these funds.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're not taking it from any other projects that have some priority with this group.
That was my question.
He read your mind. Be careful. Okay, any other questions for Kevin?
Make a motion that we accept the recommendation.
I second.
Any comments before we proceed with the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, now you're on again.
Still on.
There we go.
Do you want me to start, or do you want to say what the item is? I'll go ahead. I didn't know if you wanted to say what the item was. I will.
Oh, I'm sorry. The item is the long-range transportation plan infill target. And you all discussed this in August while I was lollygagging somewhere outside of the country. And I'm so sorry I missed the conversation. Kevin has told me it was excellent. So it has come back to us. I attended, and I will wait until Kevin does his pitch, but I will share with you what I saw and heard at the TAC meeting last week on this subject.
Perfect. Yeah, so as Jim said, we talked about this infill target at the CAC back in August. I believe we also talked about the rest of the targets as well. We made a recommendation on everything except for infill. We took that recommendation to the board. The board approved all of the targets except for infill. And again, it's the differences between some of the priorities of entities in our region. So we brought it back to the CAC. We discussed tax recommendation, and I think we passed out this page to everybody. Do you all have this? Okay. So we're going to be using this as part of the discussion, but
this was sent out yesterday, I believe. And apologies for not getting out sooner. But
I also have it up here on the. 1 second.
Actually went up this morning at 8:21 a.m.
Yep.
Okay. So on this page you have, if you go to the backside where you have 3 different layers, there's a teal layer, a pink layer, and then there's a greenish yellow layer. And so those are the 3 kind of boundaries that we're looking at. And so the TAC recommended that we use the greenish yellowish boundary as the boundary for our infill. That boundary represents the 2040 urbanizing area. So what that means is during our long-range transportation plan development, we have a program, it's called the Small Area Forecast, and it projects where growth is going to occur in the region for the next 20 years. So that boundary represents that projected growth. So the TAC recommended that we use that boundary to basically say if a project is an infill project or not. So according to their recommendation, if a project is inside that area, it's an infill project, and if it's outside, it's not an infill project. They also said that projects that are providing service to military installations would also qualify as infill, even if they're not within that boundary. We took this to the CAC a couple months ago. We discussed it. We had several CAC members mention that they don't think that this boundary was aggressive enough in trying to foster a higher density development or foster infill. And we had some discussion and some ideas thrown around that maybe it would be a good idea to see if project sponsors could identify infill areas within their own municipality boundary, and then use those areas. So I took all that information, took it to the board. We had a discussion. The board was trying to get away from having project sponsors identify their own infill areas. Several members mentioned that they think it's important that we have a regional boundary, and staff actually agrees with that thought process as well, specifically when it comes to scoring projects. It would be in every project sponsor's best interest to create an infill boundary that is very wide, because that would help them in the scoring process. It would not be very aggressive. So having a regional boundary when it comes to scoring projects, we think that would really help with that. So the board kind of, several members mentioned that they wanted to get away from that, but there was still some discussion and controversy at the board about whether to use this urbanizing boundary or to use the urbanized boundary. And so if you flip back on the other side of your page, you can see what that looks like. So the urbanized boundary is the second picture, and that's the pink area. So the urbanized boundary is defined the same way as the urbanizing, according to the census, but it basically says in order to qualify as urban, you have to have at least 1,000 people per square mile. And so that's the same definition as urbanizing, but urbanizing is projected out into the future. So the urbanized area is from the 2010 census. So that's what the region looked like in 2010. So it's a little bit more aggressive than using the urbanizing area. So we have those two boundaries, urbanizing and urbanized. The TAC recommended urbanizing. We took this back to the TAC, and we took this to the board, and the board could not agree on whether they wanted to use the urbanizing boundary or the urbanized. Again, there's different priorities. Some people want a more aggressive boundary, and some people do not. So since that board meeting, PPACG staff, we've had a lot of internal discussions, and we developed a boundary that we think is more or less a compromise between using the urbanized boundary and the urbanizing, which is the first picture on your page, which is the green boundary. So as I mentioned, the way that urbanizing is defined is 1,000 people per square mile. That's looking only at population centers. It's only looking at where people are living. What staff did is we took that same definition, but we also applied employment to it. So we said you can either have 1,000 people per square mile or 1,000 jobs per square mile, or you could have both. And that's how we came up with this other boundary. It's kind of a middle ground between using urbanizing and urbanized. So as you can see on the right, you can see there's a green square. That's Schriever Air Force Base. That's not part of the urbanized area. So we're trying to encompass some big employment centers as well. And so, again, our recommendation as staff is to use this employment/population boundary. We took this to the TAC, and they ended up staying with their original vote of using the urbanizing area. So the TAC has not changed their vote since the last time we talked. I hope that all makes sense. There's a lot of urbanized words in there, but and I'm going to pull it up on here as well. Hopefully I can.
I was going to say that's tilted.
1,000 per what?
Per square mile. Yep.
Are these 2010
Urbanized.
Urbanized.
or is it 2040 projections?
So the map on the back side of your page, you see that there's a greenish, yellowish boundary. So that is the projected boundary. So that is the least aggressive boundary of the three, and that is the one that the TAC recommended.
So can I just add, the information staff put together, which is the light blue, we used 2015 data, so that was the most current data we had for population and jobs. So that was another benefit we saw of using that as opposed to 2010 or projected 2040. We're looking at more or less right now.
Okay, Rachel, and then I'll make my comments.
Thank you, Kevin. The map and the definitions are really helpful, especially all in the same place. I'm a little confused, though, as to why this has come back to us. Because when we discussed this, I thought that the CAC had made some very specific recommendations. And so I see in the memo that we have the tax recommendations here. And I was at the last board meeting, and I know those were communicated to the board. But I don't see what the CAC recommended and what I thought, at least, that we had agreed upon. I thought we had come up with a couple of recommendations on how the infill objective could be measured, as well as some things like, I thought we had agreed that while we thought the military measure was valuable, it didn't belong with the infill. Can you just clarify some of this history as it relates to our recommendations?
Absolutely, yeah. So the CAC at the last meeting, we talked about this, didn't make a formal recommendation, but several ideas were thrown around. And I tried to encompass those in my presentation to the board, specifically the idea of having project sponsors define their own areas. And so since that last CAC meeting, I did some research and reached out to our project sponsors to see if they, in fact, already had those areas defined. I know the City of Colorado Springs is currently working on an infill plan, but they haven't yet identified specific areas that they want to have infill, and they haven't identified what that infill would actually look like. I think they will get there at some point, but they're just not that far along in their process. And it was the same for a lot of other entities in our region. They simply just didn't have infill areas identified and then have the level of density that they want defined. So that was one of the things that was mentioned at CAC. And then the service to military installations, absolutely, that was part of the TAC recommendation as well. I think that a lot of the board members liked keeping that on there. And other than those two things, I think that was really what I took away from CAC, was just kind of going to the board, getting a little bit more direction and throwing out those ideas, and then seeing what feedback they gave to us.
Okay, let me comment on. I think the TAC discussion was very good. I think also there was some reflection at that meeting about comments about being less aggressive and so forth. One of the things that I took away was the challenge of infill for the city is pretty well defined because of the city limits. For the county, it's a different matter, and they apparently have, according to Jennifer, is it? Okay, who was the former chair of the TAC and is with the county. They have their own, I'm not sure it's an infill plan, but they have a perspective that looks at some of this, more of this growing area, the 2040 limit, the pale green, as an area that can be subject to infill, certainly from the county perspective. So it's the problem that I heard in the conversation, because there was a lot on both sides in terms of how the discussion was going, and a lot of feeling, is basically the definition. There isn't a consensus on infill that we can bring to the table and say, all right, we all pretty much agree that this is what we mean by infill before we start talking about what area we're going to be concerned with. Now, Kevin, when you did your presentation to the TAC and you first showed the staff recommendation, you did it in a way where you had the blue was not seen and then it was seen. And what struck me in that was how it demonstrated where what I think of as infill was located. Can you still do that little magic thing you did and
Let me,
colors appear and then disappear?
Okay, so this map is showing basically what is on the backside of your sheet here. That yellow outline, that is the MPO boundary. So we're not talking about that. That's just our overall boundary. So we're talking about the layers within that. So this greenish, yellowish layer, this is the urbanizing area. This is what the TAC has recommended. So I'm going to turn that one off.
Well, wait a minute, because I'm confused also. That is the 2040 outlook for
Projection.
that projection that in 2040 that would now be urbanized.
Exactly. But yeah, that would be our projection today. We would say in 2040 there will be at least 1,000 people per square mile living in this area, which would mean it would be urbanized.
And am I correct that the upper area there, the one you just highlighted, that's the boundary between 24 and Powers, Stetson Hills, and areas of that nature?
I'm sorry, where?
Right, to the right
edge?
Right there.
Banning Lewis.
No, I don't think so. I think that's Stetson Hills,
green
all the
area?
area to the east of Powers that is partially developed now and will grow more in the future. I don't know exactly where Banning Lewis is. I think it's out farther.
Oh, Banning Lewis, which is over here, yeah.
The left edge of that green area is Mark Shuffle.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's,
Okay.
everything to the
Got
to
it.
the right of that is Banning
That's
Lewis.
where I was confused. I was seeing that as Powers. And then at the bottom, that's the area down by the airport?
Over here, yeah. In this area?
Yes.
Yeah, this would be, I think this is the airport. This is the airport right here, yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
What again?
It's Lorson Ranch and the area south of the airport.
Right. And then can you explain the little dots that are in the Air Force Academy? Is that just, is that the representation of the military? Up above, higher? Right
Oh,
there?
this part?
Yes.
Uh,
Because that's Air
yeah.
Force Academy.
Yeah, this is, so part of the census definition is an urban cluster, and that basically means you have, I think it's 2,500 people living in an area. So they're defining the Air Force Academy as an urban cluster as well. But that's really not too relevant for us because none of those roads are eligible.
That was my question, okay.
Mhm. But that's just how the census defines it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mention that the TAC recommended the outer layer. The staff is recommending we get away from that because the objective that we have, that the board has approved, says focus investments on existing infrastructure. So by that definition, if we are using a projected growth pattern, we would not be consistent with the objective. So I'm going to turn off the urbanizing area. So now we have two layers. The pink one is the urbanized, the 2010, and then the blue one is the one that staff developed, which is the one that takes jobs into account as well. So if I turn off the blue, you can see kind of the difference. It's pretty similar, but it's kind of a middle ground between using urbanized and urbanizing.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but just above where it says Whitefield, that little pink area where it's got a little tail sticking down, is that all of the approved development area associated with the airport? Or does that include the land that is actually the airport right now? Do you know?
Down here, this area?
No.
That's the airport.
Go up north. Go
is the
north.
airport. You can see
right
the
there.
road going around there.
Okay.
Yeah, this
so
is the airport.
That's just
right
the airport. All right.
here. Because
I think
that's the airport.
little Army exchange.
Yeah, it's on that.
To the south is in
Yeah,
that little
yeah,
tail
yeah.
piece.
No, that's fine. That's the deployment thing. Okay.
Objective language approved by board?
Yep.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, Jen and then Jen.
I guess I don't understand the logic for including all the east stuff that the TAC would use. I mean, I understand that over time, that's where the city's going to grow.
Mhm.
But if the city's supposed to effectively have infrastructure that's going to serve the biggest volume of people in the pretty much the shortest amount of time. I mean, you can expand to Kansas, but my feeling is if you're judging projects based on keeping the most popularized core of the area, why would you extend out where it will take years for that area to the east to develop? I mean, unless you're using an exorbitant amount of money and not focusing on areas of the community, and it is county and city that already have people that can better support new population and new jobs. It's just the logic to me with the TAC. Because you're not going to wait till in 2040 if you're going to prioritize projects, then that's another story. But if you're going to prioritize projects in the next 10 years, you need to focus on infilling those pieces that have the biggest bang for the buck.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with everything you said. The TAC, I mean, the TAC was not unanimous in their vote. So
Let's leave it at that for the moment. I do have a comment about the county, but go ahead.
So in developing our staff recommendation here, we went through a number of different exercises, not all of which are reflected on the map, and one of those was we thought it would be useful to give people an idea of, well, what does 1,000 people per square mile mean? What does it look like? That sounds like kind of a lot, but we realized that that is 0.6 dwelling units per acre. And Kevin went through our whole region and found some graphics for what does 0.6 dwelling units per acre look like, and he's going to show you a picture of a kind of sad brown field with a house on it, as well as what does 2 look like, what does 4 look like, and what's kind of the upper limit of where you have to switch over from single family homes to apartments to accommodate that kind of density. And so I thought maybe Kevin could show the 0.6 and any others that seem relevant.
that's perfect segue. As Jennifer mentioned, the census definition of
microphone. She's setting him up.
Softball player.
Yes, I will take what I can get. The census definition of urbanized is 1,000 people per square mile. So if you were to look at this picture, that means that there's 0.6 houses per acre. So this is what that looks like from above.
I haven't seen the points.
And then this is what that looks like from the street view. You can see that, from the street to the house, there's just a lot of space. So this would technically be classified as urban. And so,
That's really
Looks like Val.
and then I'll give you another example. So then, if you get to 2 houses per acre, you can kind of see what that density would look like.
a neighborhood.
And then you can have the street view there. The houses are still relatively large, but it's more of an urban.
Show us more of the larger density.
Yes, so we'll go to a higher density here. So maybe we'll get to 6 houses per acre from above. So you can see it's pretty close together, but they're still single family. And then you can get
What
you can see
Colorado Springs looks like now.
But what you can see here, once you get to 6 houses per acre, you can kind of tell that the garage is more or less 2/3 of the whole front of the house. So you're starting to sacrifice some of the features of the house. So once you get above that, you really start to lose the garage, and you have a smaller yard. And you can kind of see. So this is 9 houses per acre. You can see what that looks like from above, and then it's pretty dense. And once you get above 9, you're starting to talk about a mixture of single family and apartments. So now we'll go to 19. I think this is just a full apartment. No, this is a combination. So this is houses, but this building here, this is I think this is an apartment. I think 9 people live there. So if you were to look at that from the street view, it still feels like a neighborhood, but over there, this building here, there's 9 people that live there. And then you get a little bit higher to 48, and then this is just a full-on apartment. And then this one is 104, and this is from above. This is downtown, and you can see it's this. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this building. So that kind of gives you an idea of what these densities look. We can talk about density all day, but at the end of the day, if you don't understand what it looks like, then we're not talking about the same thing. So the point is, the census definition of urban is not very aggressive. And so staff, again, we would like to promote using that definition, but with stuff that is already existing today, not projecting out into the future.
So our choices,
Yeah, go ahead.
So our choices really are to either go with the staff recommendation or with the TAC recommendation?
No?
You can also go with the urbanized area. That's the pink one. That's the more aggressive one.
But that also does not include areas that are going to be employment centers or are already developing as employment centers.
The pink one, yeah. So the pink is only looking at population
urbanized,
centers.
Right.
Yep.
The blue adds employment centers.
Exactly, yep.
Okay. Which is the staff recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel?
I want to make a couple of comments, and then I'm ready to make a motion if that's okay, but I don't want to cut off the discussion if that's premature.
Well, we can comment once the motion's
Okay.
approved or made and seconded.
I feel like the discussion around this item has kind of become about whether this is a matter of city versus county priorities, and I think that that is not true. And as Aubrey pointed out, the board has approved the objective of focusing investment on infill and existing infrastructure, and I think we need to focus on how we measure that at this point, or how we put some teeth to that. And so rather than thinking about it as city versus county, I'd like to make an economic development argument for infill, which is, a lot of these older areas, and, even that is generous because the urbanized area is so generously defined, as we just saw in the pictures. But, in order to incentivize investment in those older areas, which I think we all agree we want to do so that we can be more cost effective, which is also in the board approved language, there has to be something else. And this is one small criterion that helps us get there. I think we should remember that it is just one criterion out of many in this plan. So I think the county has expressed some concerns about, is this going to give too many extra points to the city, because that's where most of the logical infill is going to happen. It's just one criterion. And so if we're serious about fulfilling this objective, and we're serious about putting some teeth into putting that investment back into older areas, then I think that we need to focus on that language. So I would like to make a motion that we recommend to the board that the infill boundary be defined as the 2010 census urbanized area. And then I would further like to move, tell me if I'm getting out of Robert's rules here, Jim.
You're so far out, go ahead.
That projects serving military installations be evaluated as a separate item. So I think that captures a lot of the discussion that we had at the CAC at the last meeting or two, that we wanted to focus on the objective language.
Okay, is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Let me make a couple of comments, if I might, and then open it up as well for any comments or questions around the table. El Paso County is not asserting I don't think it's asserting its position as an alternative to the city. It feels that what they were proposing in terms of going to the urbanizing area was in fact a compromise between the larger county needs and what they're envisioning they may have to do. I'm stating that as an attempt to try to make sure that that position is fully understood on the table. To my way of thinking, we've conflated two things and come up with a dilemma that is not really a dilemma, and let me explain that. Putting a 2040 projection as a defining limit to me, I think, is way too blue sky. I spent a lot of time in the Air Force when we did annual budgets, and we had projections that went out 5 years. And the only real money was the money that the Congress allocated for today. Anything that was out beyond that was pretty much blue sky. We have an opportunity to deal with a near term, because the projects you're going to be scoring, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the projects you're going to be scoring are really going to be in that window for the TIP and over the next 4 to 6 years, basically.
Yep.
So we're not talking about projects that are going to be out in the 20-year time frame. We're talking about projects that are going to be near term. And to me, the fact that we know this exercise takes place every 4 to 5 years anyway, this whole definition, whatever we agree on or want to put forward to the board, can be changed again in 4 to 5 years. And that position was shared outside of the context, but was shared by one of the board members with me, that we just need to get something on the table so that the rest of the process can move forward. So my personal feeling is if this is what we want to put forward, fine. And I think we can make it with the language about the military as part of it, because there's really only one installation that's affected by that amendment, and that is Schriever. The rest of, we are tightly supporting everybody else anyway. So it's not like we're going to do something dramatic at Fort Carson or the Academy or Peterson, but it's Schriever hanging out there at the end of this long, narrow racetrack that runs back and forth east and west. So I would favor a motion that does include the military reference, similar to what the TAC did. But I'm not personally sure that I want to limit it to the urbanized area. I really think the work that the staff did brings some more timely data to the table. So I'm going to shut up. Okay, now let me start with a staff explanation, and then Brother Kevin, and then Sister Tamla.
So I can't remember what it was, but something you said just reminded me, in my mind, a potential issue with using the 2040 urbanizing boundary. And so just to be clear, that's what staff developed as part of the currently approved, but really the previous long-range transportation plan, the small area forecast. Right now, as we speak, earlier today, I was upstairs developing the 3 scenarios that the committees and the board approved in Urban Sim. So really soon, we're going to have 3 different boundaries to talk about what we do with, how we use, and they're going to look very different potentially than this 2040 boundary, because we have decided we're going to talk about infill, we're going to talk about new centers, and then honestly it'll probably look a lot like dispersed development will be the 2040. So it's a little bit weird that we always have to go by the currently approved plan while we're working on the new plan, but a lot of things are changing in that area. So I guess I personally have a little bit of difficulty with thinking about bringing that forward into the current discussion when so many things are changing.
Bringing what forward? The
Continuing to reference the 2040 urbanizing boundary when pretty soon we're not even going to be talking about that anymore. Except as one of 3 scenarios.
That's dynamic in the other planning activities that are going on, is what you're saying.
Right.
Okay, so that boundary is interesting but not compelling?
It's not the whole story.
Okay, all right. Kevin?
A couple of things. I agree with your comment about this being really a 5-year problem, not a 40-year problem or a 20-year problem. And I've come to believe that what we need to do is really kind of focus on that 5-year sort of time frame, because we will change this again in 5 years. The truth of the matter is that for the next 3 years, we're operating under this old plan. And really, it's a 2020 to 2025 kind of time frame that we're sort of working on the tip thing, right? So that's one. Second, if you put that green back up, that's wrong today. I mean, Mark Shuffle Road extended, and then Vollmer Road extended in the northeast part of town, already has subdivisions built.
Right.
And they're building every day out there. There are 10 or 12 or 15 houses being sold every day outside of that green area in the light yellow area. So it also kind of covers what you said about this being not particularly realistic anymore, because I know that it's wrong. And every plan that we've had has been wrong. And so I find it hard to sort of focus on these sorts of things. So I have those perspectives. I've spent years talking about these things, and I'm a planner by nature, and I always struggle with the practicality of these plans versus the aspirational sort of pieces of this. And 40 years, I've said, just be more practical, people. Come on, put the green up there where it's actually at, and then we'll work from there. I'm done with that. I think that we've become a middle-aged city, and we need to do something different. And we're at a breaking point in terms of managing our expenses and how much these roads cost to maintain. And we need to try and drive densities up and compact our urban form, or else we are going to be in even deeper trouble than we are now. And so I'm going to support the motion.
Here, here, and not just because you're supporting
Okay.
it.
Tamara, Hal, and Jen again, and then Aubrey. So I hope I remember what I just said.
I just wanted to ask the rate of growth within the blue area you guys identified versus the pink that's already urbanized. I mean, we have people moving in. Where are they typically residing in? So is the growth happening quicker in the blue area that you've identified, or is it also still in the pink area?
No, it's in the blue area.
Right.
That blue area, the blue area that's up there at the top right, kind of straight underneath where it says Black Forest, that's already pink.
Okay, and so
But that's all,
I guess that's what so I'm glad you mentioned that, in 4 to 6 years, we're going to be doing this again, because I'm looking at it as a 2045, in which case the blue area will be densely populated, because that is where the highest growth rate in our city is. So then it becomes that I would want to include the blue area. But if we're going to revisit this in 4 to 6 years, then chances are the blue areas currently would not be as urbanized as, let's say, the pink areas are. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I mean, the blue area is definitely less aggressive than the pink. It just depends on what you're referring to. Are you talking about where people are living or where the jobs are?
Where people are living, I guess, and where jobs are both, right? Because typically you try and live close to where the jobs are.
Yeah, because the pink area, again, is only taking into account where people are living.
Okay.
So,
Interesting.
Can I try to help add something to that? So originally, when we went through the process of developing the staff recommendation, we had several different colors, and that's what we showed TAC. And those were different levels of density. We did, under 1,000 people. We did activity units combining people and jobs. And then we did 1,000 to 2,000, 2,000 to 4,000, 4,000 to 8,000. And originally, staff thought about drawing some rings. Can we get a more condensed boundary than what we've been talking about here? And one problem was that we have pockets of higher and lower density development all over, whatever you want to look at, the pink blob or the blue blob, and it was nearly impossible to draw a smaller ring because things are so spread out here. And even our red, which is the highest density piece, if we tried to draw a ring around it, it would have looked very similar to that, and it would have had a lot of holes in the middle. And so it's kind of a complicated answer to your question, but the answer is everywhere and nowhere.
but I should point out that when we get to scoring, which we haven't gotten to yet, but when we do, we don't necessarily have to use one boundary. So the boundary we're developing today is for our target. It's what we want to achieve. But when we get to scoring, so say, for example, today we end up approving the urbanized area. When we get to scoring, we could, for example, we could say a project that's in that area would get full points. A project that's in the urbanizing area maybe gets half a point, or whatever we would come up with. So the boundary we come up with today is, again, it's for the target, but when we score, we are probably going to have multiple boundaries saying where a project is located.
Okay, Hal?
am I correct in making the assumption that the blue really represents jobs, business, employment? No, but I mean jobs, not necessarily houses, not necessarily. Well, but okay, but the blue is that area that includes where jobs are being grown the fastest, potentially. Well, I mean, based on my knowledge of the Northeast, I would agree that the blue tends to be a magnet for companies. One of the things that I look at is, Colorado Springs and El Paso County, we do have to compete for businesses. And part of the process of competition is making sure that they have services and infrastructure. Housing development is a little bit different in that if a developer really wants to put something in, he'll pay something to support the infrastructure needs. That's true, and we need to do a better job at the El Paso County level, in my opinion, of getting more out of our developers. So I would prefer the next slide, the one that doesn't have the green but keeps the blue, because that says that we are looking at areas that are already developing. They may be very close to urbanized already. Granted, 5 years from now, we'll know better. But I think that gives us an opportunity to use that when we go to compete for companies that are looking for relocation, looking for jobs. Hopefully I got that quickly, Jim.
We're third in line. No, wait. You're in line. Jen.
I'm very much for the staff's recommendation for two reasons. One is that when I did strategic planning, I would never use, if I had a hold of 2015 data, I would never use 2010 data or use 2015 data. And because of the amount of growth that happened between 12 and 15, because you had enough distance between post-recession, I think that's important. And I also think what I liked in the stacked recommendation is a composite of both business and population. And I think from at least being able to start the scoring there there's some strength to doing it in that methodology. So I appreciate that they put all the time into developing that, and so my preference would be to stick with the staff recommendation. Schriever, I see from just my husband's job and from what I know is happening as far as growth process, it's remarkable. I don't know how you handle that, but
They don't want anybody out there anyway.
I think that's something I might want to choose to leave to the board based on what the importance is.
Okay. Aubrey.
Yeah, I just need to state for the record that my vote is based strictly on which of the maps best aligns with the target language or the objective language that the board has already approved. I am here on El Paso County Public Health's time, and just coming off maternity leave, didn't have time to put together rationale one way or the other for the public health implications of such a policy decision to be able to vote one way or the other that way. But based on what target best fits the objective language, that's how I'll be voting.
I'm sorry, and just make clear that because sometimes I don't hear it real well either. You are supporting the motion?
Yes, I will support.
Okay, thank you. All right, Patty.
Yeah.
Patty?
Yes, picture number 3, you refer to as blue sky.
I did.
You did?
I did, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and Rachel pitched the 2010, picture number 2,
No.
right?
Yeah.
The 2010 data.
Just the pink.
And
Pink,
it has
pink, you're too pink.
Just the pink.
Just the pink.
Just the pink, not the blue, just the
I don't know where I put
Okay,
it.
I
Here we
just wanted to
go. No,
make
I
sure
got it.
that I had the boundary straight for what, and so why do you want 2010 instead of 2015 data? Because it supports the objective? Is that your rationale?
Yeah, for me, it's not about the date of the data, it's the content of the data. So that 2010 data, correct me if I'm wrong here, is the census-defined urbanized area, which is that 1,000 people per square mile. What the staff did was add into that, right? So they're just
Selected
aggregating
areas.
some additional data into what we only get in certain years because it's census-based. So we were talking earlier about, what is a proper definition for infill? That, I think, is a definition we can defend, that 1,000 people per square mile.
Okay, the 2010 pink supports the objective,
Yes.
clearly.
Okay, Julie?
So I question the language then, actually. The objective is existing, but the map with the blue is existing. And Jennifer's nodding her head. So I would argue, Aubrey, that is existing and that makes more sense to vote for that one. So
that would be where I also support the blue.
Did I see a hand from Kim? Was it you?
Well, can you help me out by going back to which one we're voting on?
Okay,
Show us the
basically,
map.
right now,
Is there a pink map?
what I heard on the motion was pink,
Yeah, that's the one.
pink
we're voting on.
boundary,
Pink without blue.
and
Oh, just
then,
that,
separate the language on military from the basic.
I meant those as two separate motions.
We only had 1 second. Was the second for both motions? Let's take them one at a time.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, because I think the language about the military can be incorporated easily enough. So motion number 1, once again, would you please state your motion in terms of color?
That the infill boundary be defined as the 2010 census urbanized area, which is pink.
Okay, and there is a second to that? And Courtney has seconded that. I'm going to cut the discussion at this point and call for a vote on that motion. All those in favor of the motion as stated signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Can we show of hands, please? Okay, this, in favor, first of all, those in favor of the motion to approve only the urbanized area to move that forward as our recommendation, only the urbanized area for the infill. Please raise your hands. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3. Dave, you're hiding back there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
I'm abstaining because I'm new to this and I don't feel like I understand the issue.
It's fine. I'm abstaining because I'm the chairman.
Okay.
Oh, that's nice.
Would,
So the motion fails.
Rachel, would you be willing to modify your motion?
Well,
Well, we can have a new motion.
Never
Make a
mind.
new motion.
Need a new
How about a
motion.
new motion?
All right, Jen?
I'd like to move that we support the staff's blue defined area that is based on 2015 area and looks on a more specific concentration.
Pink plus blue.
So it's smaller.
No,
It's
just
staff recommendation.
Okay, so staff
This map
recommendation.
is blue.
Pull up staff.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, that map is all blue. Is there a second for that
Second.
motion?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I'm 7 years old.
Second from Tammy.
Map 1.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is all blue on the handout.
The blue one.
Okay, we've had a motion and a second. All those in...
Can I ask?
Sorry, go ahead.
What are we doing with this military question? Are we just ignoring that,
Oh,
or is
right.
it
That's
staying in
separate,
yours?
The reason I'm doing that is I think that's a board decision, and I think it may be a business decision.
Well, no, we'll come back.
Your motion
Right.
does include...
She had a separate motion with the military piece, so,
But she didn't get a second for that.
right,
Staff recommendation includes the military at this point.
includes Schrader.
I don't
I
think,
just wanted to clarify.
Is that correct?
I don't think Jim
Yeah, yeah.
asked for the second motion to be considered.
Well, we haven't had a second to it yet.
You didn't ask anybody to.
You
if they
didn't
would give one.
separate them.
Yeah.
So if we separate them, maybe there was
Well, can we come back to that? I'd like to get the major thing done before we're thrown out of here in 6 minutes. Yes, Helen?
The staff recommendation, i.e. the blue map, how well does that fit the language of the board statement of goals?
Well, the board objective statement says, what?
Invest in infrastructure with a focus on invest in infill with a focus on existing infrastructure.
And both the staff recommendation includes existing infrastructure because it dates from 2015 data.
Right, by the definition, and remember he showed us the picture of one house and on an acre.
Yep.
So that fits the definition of what is urbanized.
Are we agreed on that? Just that statement, that it does include existing infrastructure? Okay. So, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion to approve the staff recommendation signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And we'll do the hand raising, yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13. Those opposed? And we have 2 opposed. Laura, were you opposed or no? No. Okay, thank you. So that passes, that we will move that forward. Now, Rachel, back to you. How do you want to move on with regard to the military?
I had moved that projects serving military installations be evaluated in a different criteria, not in the infill criteria. Because I think it's appropriate for infrastructure to support military installations, but I'm not sure it matches the infill objective as approved by the board.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the table. Any further discussion on that? Hearing none. Those in favor, and let's do the hand raising again, those in favor of the motion to recommend military be considered separately but not as infill per se. Opposed? Same sign. And one abstention. So we have one opposed and one abstention. I think we've got some work done.
I think we do, but I'm sorry to disappoint everyone. We're not done yet. There's one more thing we have to do.
Before you do, I'd just like to ask a question. Brian, you've been quieter than I was. Just you can. I don't know that you need to get up here. My question for you is basically: do you feel that the TAC position has been fairly presented by staff or by my comments or whatever from that discussion?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the tax recommendation all along has been a compromise, and I don't really think, with compromises, not everybody really gets what they want. Our effort last week, the city's perspective changed quite a bit in realizing that the recommendation of the TAC for the target is totally misaligned, unsupportive, and not consistent with the objective that's been approved. And that's why city staff, two of us at TAC last week, opposed the tax recommendation.
Okay.
So, what was that?
It was quiet.
Well, no, I just wanted to make sure that.
Well, I don't want to interfere in your debate, and
No,
you
but I
guys
wanted
did a
to
great
make sure
job. So.
that we had not overlooked any aspect of the TAC discussion, and I tried to make sure, as I promised at the TAC meeting, that I would try to represent it. And in the summary that you approved was very helpful, but I also think that Kevin did a good job in bringing forward the discussion.
Yes, yeah. And from the city perspective, we would have been very happy with the 2010 urbanized area. But both myself and Tim Roberts, the other city rep last week, thought that the PPACG staff recommendation, the 2010 urban area and the additional employment areas in the blue area, that was a good step in the right direction. But we would have liked to have seen it a little bit more aggressive. But
Okay. All right,
Thank
Kevin,
you.
you have 2 minutes.
Okay. So now that we've agreed on a boundary, we have to ask the question of what is the target actually going to say? What number do we want to put to this target? So basically the question is, how many projects do we want to have in this boundary, and how many projects are we okay with having outside the boundary? That's kind of the question that we need to answer, so we have a target that we can actually look back on and say we achieved it or we didn't achieve it. So if you looked at the urbanized area, which is almost the same as this boundary, I did a quick calculation of the projects from the 2040 plan. So 94% of the projects were inside this boundary, the one that you voted on, and 6% were outside. So the question is, do we want to be more aggressive than that? What kind of language do we want to use? Do we want to just say increase the number of projects in the boundary, decrease the number of projects, achieve 98% of the projects in? That's the next question we have to answer.
Quickly.
Kind of
Hold on, Bethany, we are supposed to be out of here at 5?
Nobody goes to the public meetings.
Nobody's here for the public meeting? Okay, well, let's okay, wrap it
So
up.
what kind of projects are we talking?
So we did not differentiate between the projects. Any project that made it into the 2040 plan, we just looked at if it was in or out.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I guess can you help me to understand, is it typically just a safety type of projects or new construction, or widening, or is it, will stormwater being one of the huge issues? Can you kind of give me an idea of what our past projects, the 94 versus the 6% included?
Yeah, it was really a combination of everything. I mean, it included, there's a lot of widening projects, there was sidewalk projects, I think there was a few safety projects in there. So it was just any project that is submitted to us that makes it into the fiscally constrained list of projects in the 2040 plan, that was what we looked at. So it could be any type of project. If it was a study, obviously you can't decide where that is located, so we didn't count that.
Okay, now hold on. Kevin, okay. So you have a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we make the split 95-5.
95.
Second, 95 in and 5 out.
Right.
Second, Helmoff.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Now, John, do you have a comment?
The only question I had, is this prioritized based on funds available? Or is this just blue sky?
The projects?
2004?
Yeah, they're all going to be scored, and depending on how much money we have, it's all based on that. Mm-hmm.
But that hasn't been done yet?
Not yet, no.
Okay.
We're developing the criteria to score those projects right now. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to make the distinction 95% of the projects to be in infill per the area that we've just recommended, and 5% outside.
Question on the motion, is that by project or is it by money? Are we talking about 95% of the money or 95% of the number of projects?
We're talking about projects. And the reason we didn't go to money is because the amount of money we receive every year is different. So you're going to be changing your denominator every year.
Just want the clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ooh. And then one abstention.
Oh, me too.
2 abstentions. Okay.
All right, thank you. We did it.
I'm surprised that we had to get to the target. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted. Okay, we have, hold on.
Kevin has something to say.
That's why Kevin did it.
Kevin has something else to say?
But it was 94.6, and he said.
Good meeting.
Hold on.
Or within one more.
So thank you, Bethany. This will be possibly my last CAC meeting.
What?
What?
What? You've just broken you down.
I will possibly be back. I'm going to be a ski instructor this winter, and so I will probably come back after that. But I will be gone for about 6 months. But I will be still maintaining the tip and making sure that the transportation department. I could commute. That would not be very fun, though.
Where are you going to be teaching at?
At Snowmass. What's that? Well, I'm technically going to be working part-time, so I'm going to continue to maintain the tip. So, again, we're very understaffed, so I didn't want to leave everyone empty-handed, so I'm going to continue to maintain the tip and just do kind of administrative stuff. But I probably won't be at the CAC meetings for a while.
Where are you going to be teaching skiing at?
At Snowmass.
Hell of a commute.
Oh.
Yeah, I know.
Alan?
But I want to thank everyone again for, it's been a great pleasure working with all of you. Hopefully I'll be back, but you never know. But again, thank you all for the support.
It's been fun to watch you get more comfortable at the podium, frankly.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think you've been with us for a year?
A year and 8 months. Yep.
Time flies. Ellen, did you have a comment?
Oh, just wanted to say a generic thank you for the technology that allows you to still telecommute and support the TIF, et cetera, but also that you would even consider staying on. I wish you all the fun and excitement that this role in your life will bring to you at Snowmass, and please think seriously about staying on.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Love to see you again. Thank you.
What Ellen just said.
Thank you.
Okay, any group announcements? Any fundraisers going on, Hal?
No, sir.
I was here for 2 in a row on that. The only thing I would say is if you are going to be at the Fine Arts Center Halloween party on Saturday night, A group that I'm affiliated with called the Tycho Society is going to perform at 7:45 and 8:45.
Oh, you were born there?
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah, well, that goes.
Okay.
Come on out and watch us do things, play drums. It's fun. Ellen?
Have we not had enough shout-outs yet for tomorrow's ribbon-cutting ceremony at 1 o'clock for the Cimarron exit? I don't think we've had quite enough shout-outs for that, but to show respect for my esteemed colleague from Manitou Springs, I'd like to also point out that the Emma Crawford Coffin races are coming up this weekend, and no one should miss those.
Really?
They are.
Okay.
You
All
never
right.
know.
Well,
We're adjourned. Thank you.
I was in, Kenya.
Yeah. See.
Yeah.
And then
Good chat.
Good to chat with you, John.
shot pictures at Harvey.
Yep.
Similar to
Oh, did
Pearl,
you
so I was
really?
gone for
Oh, wow.
8 days with Harvey.
Is that Feifel?
Fife Lee.
Feifel?
Fife Lee, it's like an L-E-E.
Fife Lee.
Yeah, like
Okay.
an E-E.
I don't know how to say it.